Linda Bernard, also Police Commissioner Linda Bernard for the mighty District 2. My guest today is a very distinguished gentleman he's here today without the appendage he always has, and that is a camera. My guest is Mr. Sherman Eaton, the publisher and founder of Native Detroiter magazine. We all know you well, Sherman. We've seen you for years. How are you today?
Well, first of all, Linda, thanks for inviting me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here. And today I'm fine.
I like that. Okay. You are such an interesting man. And I'll remind our viewing audience today that we're coming to you from WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. You can watch us, listen to us, subscribe to us, comment on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, all of the social media platforms here at WJZZ. Sherman, tell me about you. Where were you born?
I'm a native Detroiter. I was born
here. So this is where this comes from. You are native Detroiter.
I am a native Detroiter, and I'm proud to be one. I was born in Hopper Hospital, March 31st, 1951. So I've been here my entire life.
I see. So you're an Aries.
I am.
Aha. You made it though. You were on between Aries and Pisces, but really you're solid Aries, obviously.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you're a Ram.
I think so.
Okay. Boom. I got you. When you say you were born here in Detroit, did you go to school here in Detroit?
From elementary to high school.
Okay. Where'd you go?
Actually, I went to 4 different elementary schools. My original elementary school was Moore Elementary, because I lived on Cardona and Oakland. And
that's the east side.
That's the east side, one of the toughest parts of the east side in the 50s.
Okay.
And I graduated from Northwestern in 1968.
Oh, Northwestern High School.
Northwestern High School.
So you're one of the very distinguished alumni from Northwestern. It includes Damon Keith and so many other people that you could probably help me with all of their names. I know that a number of very prominent Detroiters went to Northwestern High School.
Absolutely. It was kind of the mecca behind Cass Tech, of course, of successful graduates. But Damon Keith is a little before my time.
Oh, I know that but it was a real institution. That's my point. I mean, it was an amazing high school. Do you know what's happening with Northwestern High School now?
Not currently. I couldn't bring you absolutely up to date, but I do know it still exists.
Yes, it is right there on West Grand Boulevard. That's a fact. Did you go to college after high school?
I went to Highland Park Community College.
Oh, the mighty HP.
The mighty HP, and had intended to stay there for a while, but I found a great job at Wayne Assembly, putting 2 tires on every car and 1 in every other trunk. And my goal was just to retire from the UAW. But unfortunately, I got drafted to the Vietnam War. And as a consequence, I could either go to the war or go to college. And I said, well, this college thing sounds pretty good when you consider going to the war. And I can remember being happy about being drafted, telling my cousin, well, hey, man, I'm going to the Army. And he said, Sherman, that's a pretty good way to get killed.
All right, at that time, that's for sure.
It's a pretty good way to die. So you better think about that college thing.
So you went to college. Where'd you go?
I went to Highland Park Community College and transferred to Michigan State University.
Okay. So you're a Spartan.
Absolutely. Through and through.
And did you get your degree there?
I got my degree there and subsequently became a teacher as a result of my experience at Michigan State.
I see. What was your, looking back now, your most exciting experience at Michigan State?
Ooh.
A lot of them?
Michigan State was the party school in the country.
Really?
When I went to Michigan State, the circus was in town. We partied 7 days a week.
And went to school during the day and partied at night, huh?
Well, some people went to school all the time. I was just fortunate enough to have a lot of help so I could party.
I see. That was fantastic. So you were at MSU, and they were doing great in sports at that point, and everything like they are now.
We weren't doing as great.
Okay.
We were not doing as great. We never won a championship in anything when I was at Michigan State. I think if we won a championship, it would be the best party school in America because that's what it was at the time.
I see.
But a lot of people did get a great education there. Many of my friends are doctors, lawyers, engineers. Uh, I just was part of that rare breed. Well, hey,
You were a social butterfly.
I was gonna have me some fun.
I heard that. Well, I think that's the way most Aries are. They like to do what they want to do when they want to do it. Just the way it is.
It's life in America.
That's correct. So you graduated from Michigan State, and then you say you started teaching. Where'd you teach?
I was an English teacher for 44 years. Subject, predicate, sentence, paragraph, essay, book report, research paper.
I see. And you where did you taught for DPD?
DPS.
S deep not DP. I'm there. I'm in the police mode. I'm sorry. DPS.
Right.
Detroit Public Schools.
And Detroit public schools had a lot to offer students back in those days.
They really did.
It was a complete education, and I don't think it needed to be changed.
I don't either.
We had many engineers, doctors, judges with the same basic curriculum. When they started tinkering with the curriculum, they got rid of English, language arts, banned from many schools. They got rid of
Art.
art, many of the things that help people grow.
And even old stuff like home economics and
Home
stuff like that.
economics,
I mean,
yeah.
it made sense. They taught you life skills as well as developed you academically.
All of that's gone now. I don't know.
I don't know what they learn these
I don't
days.
know what they learn in school. I have no idea of even what they're doing in the public schools. I went on the internet to look up DPS's curriculum, and I read it 5 times, and I still cannot tell you what they're teaching in school today.
Do you know there are less than 52,000 students in the Detroit public school system?
Well, it does not surprise me because I think the system was designed to fail and designed to go away.
Well, see, you're an expert because you're a teacher. I've never been a teacher. You understand classrooms, you understand students. And what would you, in your opinion, be the ideal system or the ideal curriculum?
Well, first of all, you got to teach students how to write. I don't know of a university anywhere on this planet that you can attend and not know how to write something. The average student, some of our best students as far as I know, unless things have changed, our top students at Cass and Renaissance don't know what a thesis statement is. They can't define a sentence. A sentence is a group of words that expresses a complete thought and has a subject and predicate. But you ask any Detroit student what a sentence is, they have no idea. So how do you educate children for higher learning and you don't teach them how to write anything?
The basics are missing, is what you're saying.
A lot more in the basics, but for sure, many of the basics are missing.
Because the definition of a sentence, like you just said, is part of the basics. It's part of building, and you build on knowledge. But unless you have the fundamentals, unless you have the infrastructure, you can't really learn as you keep going up. And you see it in the way people speak in Detroit.
Well, not only in Detroit, but across the country. Our educational system is failing our students right now. And a basic example, and I'll refer back to writing. Writing actually teaches an individual how to think. A single thought from your brain to a sheet of paper is called a sentence. An ideal from your brain to a sheet of paper is called a paragraph. So by teaching a student how to write, you teach them how to formulate single thoughts and develop those thoughts into ideals.
And put them on paper so that they can be preserved.
They can be preserved, but you put them in your brain so that you can process information correctly.
But isn't part of that the importance, which you're speaking about, is also the importance of reading?
Reading is
Oh my gosh.
very important.
Fundamental.
We had basic books we had to read When I was in high school, required reading for the 11th,
Mm-hmm.
12th grade. We had to read certain books to gain a certain amount of information. Reading is one of the most critical skills that any student can ever learn and will take him further than just his dreams.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing about it is that, as you and I both know, libraries are free. You can walk in and read anytime. I
Right.
mean, it's amazing to me when I see how people from foreign countries take advantage of that. Um, I was listening actually before he passed away to Sidney Poitier, and he was talking about how he learned. As you and I both know, he spoke perfect English,
Right.
read, write, think, etc. And he taught himself listening to the radio and going to the library in New York City. He was a waiter. And so what he would do is he would go to the library and he would also listen to the radio to listen to people who were speaking correctly. So he would learn how to speak perfectly in terms of diction. We have now with the new, I don't know if you're aware of it, with the new budget for the state, I think it's almost $10,000 or $11,000 per student that goes with the student in terms of education, and none of them, many of them, cannot speak, read, and write correctly, as you and I both know.
That's an interesting comment because I took a trip to Kenya one year, and I was in the bush where people wore traditional African garments and no shoes, some of them, and I came across a group of little girls, and they were speaking to me about where I was from, and I say, "Wow, you guys speak in perfect sentences. Where did you learn to speak so well?" And they looked at me in amazement and just said, "In school." So,
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and it really cripples you, really for the rest of your life. Because if you learn how to read, and you learn the language, just the English language, you learn how to think clearly, and deductive reasoning, etc. It all is part of just the basics in education. This past year, um, as you know, schools have been closed, and many of them are still closed because everything is involved with the unions, etc. I feel like we've lost people permanently. I always say, Sherman, I don't know about you, but if I had been out of school between the ages of 13, I went to Catholic school, but from 12, 13 to 15, 16, the streets would have caught me.
right,
Because I was a girl, I was kind of cute with great big glasses, but nonetheless, and the streets would have caught me. School gives a student structure. And structure is everything in life. I mean, you got to get up, you got to get dressed, you got to go to school. The teachers have expectations of you that you are expected to meet. You have, friends, you have clubs,
right,
things, you have a society in school. And without that structure, for me, even though Catholic school didn't have any of the amenities that you had in Northwestern High School, no swimming, no nothing, nothing like that.
hmm
I mean, it still had that structure that gave me, obviously, school was my job.
Well, public education was designed to develop workers for the factory. So
Really?
public education was designed to give a student structure. You have to be here on time, you have to perform this task, and you have to move on to the next task. When America became industrialized, we did not have the workers to work in the factory. We had to train those workers to work in factories.
Okay.
And part of that training was public education because of the structure.
Okay. So once you learn structure, then you can take it into other areas and so forth.
You can work a job. You've been trained to work a job.
Right. And that's important. But it's also
Absolutely.
because it develops your mind. And as you said earlier, it develops your skills. You know what a sentence is, you know how to read, write, think, count, etc. I mean, these are things that are learned behaviors
hmm
that you have to learn. They don't just come to you through osmosis. Otherwise, we'd be like animals.
That's absolutely correct. I have a high regard for education. I hope somehow the educational system improves locally as well as nationally because you don't come in this world knowing very much. Everything after you get here is learned or taught behavior. It just depends on who you learn it from and who taught it to you.
Right, in terms of the accuracy of what you learn. You can learn how to spell, but you don't. But if you're not spelling correctly, then you don't know how to spell.
That's true.
Essentially, it goes back to what you said earlier, when you were defining, how to put together paragraphs, how to put together sentences, etc. But you learned it well, I'll say, because you said you were in the school system. Were you also in a GM or in the plants, etc.?
I I was not a good high school student, and I'm going to answer
Oh,
your
you
question.
said that, yeah, for a
I
minute.
was not a good high school student because my whole goal in life was, as soon as I turn 18, I'm going to the plant.
That's right.
On my 18th birthday, at 11 o'clock in the morning, I went to Wayne Assembly and took my physical. At 2 o'clock, I was on the line putting two tires on every car and one in every other trunk.
But you that's because you wanted to make money.
That's because a factory worker today, a factory worker back then made as much money as a lawyer.
Right.
There were many of our grandparents who worked locally. Factories were right down the street. They walked to work. Factories were a means of income, a means of success, and a means of a great lifestyle.
They created the middle class.
They created the middle class. There were factory workers making $125,000, $150,000 a year.
And husbands and wives would often be factory workers, so they would double that income.
We had, our grandparents had a great life working in the factory. In fact, their lives may have been better than ours today with college degrees.
Well, in many respects, I think that's true. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to and watching Chop It Up with attorney Linda Bernard. If you don't recognize this gentleman to my across from me because he doesn't have his camera, it's the famous publisher, writer, photographer, Mr. Sherman Eaton. A well-known person throughout the media community, not only in Detroit but across the United States of America. You can watch us, listen to us, comment, etc. on any and all social media platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, everything. So tune in and be sure to look up this episode in case you're not watching us live with Mr. Sherman Eaton. Now, Sherman, you're well known in Detroit, and you're well known for this particular publication right here, Native Detroiter, if everybody can see. This is a fabulous, glossy, first-class publication that is unique to the city of Detroit. It takes a lot of work to put this publication together. And it's all based on English. Am I wrong?
Well, it's
English is words, 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 and words.
Well, I like to make a comment in that regard. I designed the Native Detroiter to be a picture magazine. We now live in what I call the post-literate society.
Oh, more. Post-literate.
People don't read anymore. If I make a story over 500 words, I know they're not going to read it.
Oh,
So
wow.
I've cut down a lot of the verbiage, increased the quality of the photograph, and hopefully that will attract young readers and old readers as well. It will attract people to the publication because it's a good feel-good magazine.
It is that. But when did you first realize that? Was it before? How long has Native Detroiter been in existence?
It's been at least over 30-something odd years, and I got the idea when I was a school teacher, teaching the 6th grade at McKinstry Elementary School. Back in those days, current events was part of the school curriculum. But my current events for my student was, don't only bring in a newspaper article, but bring in a newspaper article that is positive about Detroit. 2 weeks in a row, students came back and said, well, Mr. Eaton, there's nothing positive about Detroit in the newspapers.
Really?
And one little girl in my class said, Mr. Eaton, why don't we say something good about Detroit? I said, wow, that's a good idea. I was driving home that day, and this record came on the radio called Native New Yorker. Nobody opens the door when you're a native New Yorker. And I said, Native New Yorker, Native Detroiter.
Right.
And that's how it was born.
I see. So, can you tell our audience, is it hard to start a magazine? What does it take? What are the fundamentals?
I didn't know that question either. I didn't know that either. So I went to the library and got a book called How to Start a Magazine. But I got that idea from a guy named Larry Patrick. Larry
I know Larry
Patrick.
Patrick. He's a lawyer.
Larry Patrick was one of the big boys at the boys club when I used to go to the boys club.
Okay.
And when I went to the boys club, Larry Patrick would always be reading. I say, Larry, why you read so much? He said, because anything you want to know is in a book.
That's
He
true.
said, Sherman, you don't have to figure anything out. If you want to know something, just go get a book. So it was that ideal he planted in me at 9 years old that when I became 20 years old, I remembered. I said, how to start a magazine is in a book somewhere. So I went to the library and just got a book.
I see. And that book told you, what did you do as a result of reading that book?
That book told me everything from A to Z. Advertising, articles, pictures, layout, graphics, who to talk to, where to go, what to do. It taught me from A to Z. It was a very thick book. Very, very thick.
Mm-hmm. So did you make an outline of that book? Is that what you did?
I copied every page in it.
Okay. And then you used it in what respect?
And all the knowledge that I gained, all the knowledge that I couldn't experience, I read about it.
So did you make outlines? What'd you do, Sherman? Or
No.
did you get your students involved?
Not at that time.
Okay.
Not at that time. They were sixth graders.
Okay.
Fifth and sixth graders. So they were a little early for them.
Okay.
But I did get ideas. But from that book, I developed a concept on how to start and what I need to do just to get the first one off. The first magazine was terrible. It was not good. And my backers, the people who I got to support me, they all backed out. They all backed out now.
Well, you had people who funded the magazine?
I had people who put in a few dollars to help me get started. I wound up giving most of that money back. But there were a couple of guys who stuck with me. Leonard Pickett and Jerome Barney stuck with me to the end. But then I didn't know how to do a magazine, so I bankrupt twice.
Okay.
I just had to bankrupt it out twice because I didn't know how to do it. But I wouldn't give up on the idea.
Okay.
So eventually I got it right.
Oh, I see. I did not know that you had those kind of challenges with respect to the magazine. So you were working full time at this time, still as teaching, correct?
Yes.
And then putting together this magazine that you wanted to say something about Detroit.
Something positive about
Something
it.
positive about Detroit. Okay. So did you always want to make it a magazine, as you say, filled with pictures because people don't want to read more than 500 words?
Well, I give them information, and if they want to read it, it's there.
I see. And you've got the Detroiters you should know, and there's some people that we know, and everything. It's really interesting. I mean, and of course, the beautiful people.
You gotta have them, buddy.
Yeah, you have fashion, you have swimsuits, great fashion, beautiful models, handsome men. And then the people of the city of Detroit, these are the pictures that you take.
The party
That's why I
pictures.
always see you with a camera.
Party pictures.
That's what they're called, the party pictures?
The party pictures. You can go anywhere in Detroit on any given Saturday or Sunday or Friday night, and somebody's party.
That's correct.
Somebody is having a good time somewhere.
And you take their picture,
Yeah,
and then you put it in a magazine.
that's it.
And then everybody wants to see your magazine because they want to see their picture.
I hope so.
Absolutely. So you funded the magazine, you said initially through some friends. How did things change in terms, because this is an expensive publication.
And that's why I don't have any challenges. There's not a real competitor for the Navy Detroit because it costs too much money.
To make it.
It costs too much money to make it.
Do you have sponsors now, or what do you
have
have?
advertisers.
Advertisers.
And that's what carries you through
On all magazines, right?
on all of them.
Like Somerset Collection on the back of
Somerset,
this.
I was very fortunate to get their support and maintain their support.
And lawyers are
Lawyers.
advertising in the magazine, and other businesses and so forth. Wayne County's various assistance, Michigan assistance programs,
You gotta give people a place to go when they need help, so I keep them in there.
and the clubs and organizations also advertise in here, do they
Shout
not?
out to Floods Bar and Grill. Shout out to Good Times.
Yep.
Shout out
Avis Ford.
Avis Ford.
Right. Detroit Community Health Connection. Really, it's amazing. And there's our good friend Arthur Blackwell. He was on the cover of your magazine.
Years ago.
Yep, I
In
see.
fact, Art Blackwell, man, was one of my greatest supporters. I don't think I'd be here today without several people, but Art Blackwell would be one of those people who took me over the hump when all was lost.
Okay. Well, that's great to hear. He's a great guy. He's a smart man. Very, very smart man. Coleman Alexander Young, Jesse Jackson, everybody.
I remember when I met Coleman, and actually one of my models met Coleman for me and introduced me to Coleman. And she was at the precinct when he was running, and Coleman said to her when she gave him a magazine, "How come I'm not on the cover?" And she said, "Well, wait a minute. I'll find out why and tell you."
And then you put him on there.
Then I put him on the cover.
But you've got Kenya Moore from the Housewives of Atlanta.
Kenya Moore has done like 6 covers. I mean,
She's beautiful.
I used to hold beauty contests, and Kenya won the first one. She was absolutely one of the prettiest women in the city at that time.
She absolutely. She still is one of the prettiest women in the country. I mean, she's gorgeous.
She's gorgeous.
From head to toe, she's just absolutely
Man,
beautiful.
She did that cover when she was 17.
And she was Miss Black USA.
I remember.
She won the beauty pageant for the country.
I did a shot for
She's
Silver,
right here.
for Silver Fox Furs. I was doing a shooting outside the store with Richard Welch and not Johnny Washington. Keith Washington was driving by and stopped his car and says, "Hey, I want to meet her." We said, "Well, hey, man, put on a coat and we'll shoot y'all together."
Uh-huh.
And just out of the blue, Kenya and Keith shot an ad for a native Detroiter by accident.
That was wonderful because she was so pretty. She was stopping traffic.
Man, Kenya was fine.
I was watching Grant Hill during the NBA All-Stars weekend, and you had him on your cover with his wife, Tamia.
Right. He was that deal when he was here.
Yep.
He was that deal. They were at a party at the African American Museum. And I walked up. She was sitting on his lap.
Yep,
said,
and you took that great picture
I
of
took
them.
that picture. I said, "Wow, this got to go in the book."
Right. I see. And then, of course, you had Jennifer Granholm, our first woman governor, on the cover.
Bernice Davis Anthony did 2 covers. She was a big help.
Yes.
She was a big. Nobody gets anywhere without help, and she was a big help to me.
Oh, that's wonderful. And, of course, the queen of soul herself, Aretha Franklin.
Aretha called me about 6 months before her death because I put a picture of her, Lou Rawls, and her sister in the magazine. And
Okay.
she says, I saw the magazine. Thank you for putting me and my sister in there. And she says, I have some projects that's coming up, and maybe you can help me and become involved in those projects. She was starting a foundation. This was like a year before her death. Mm-hmm. I said, whatever you need, you got me.
Right.
Just call
She
me.
was such a smart woman, wasn't she? She was so doggone intelligent. She was amazing to talk to.
In
Aretha
fact,
was
you know
special.
what? That's where I met you at. I met you at Aretha's party when she was in Bloomfield.
Okay.
When she was in Bloomfield, you and I were at the party together, and you were talking to a good friend of ours, Jesse
Okay.
Jackson. And
Okay.
I took a picture of you and Mr. Jackson together, and that's what I met you at Aretha's
Oh, wow.
party.
Wow. I didn't remember that it was
You remember when she
Aretha's.
lived in Bloomfield?
Yes, I do. Very, very, very much. Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
a
she always
great-
had a house in Bloomfield, house in Detroit. She kept them both.
That was a great party.
That was a great party.
What was our friend's name that stayed next door to her?
Um,
Owned all the McDonald's.
I know you're talking about. Oh shoot.
That was her.
He sold them all now. He's a very successful businessman
He had
and a
He
professor.
stayed next door, and he would give parties. And why does his name escape me?
Me and you both. I don't know why, but yep.
He would
Aretha.
give parties, and Aretha would be there
Right.
at all his parties.
Right. Yep. But you're right. There's a lot of people in Detroit that were very successful that gave incredible parties and incredible events. And Sherman, you always captured them all.
I tried, but we didn't just party in Detroit. We had this very serious agenda at times too. When we needed to come together in the old days, 60s, 70s, 80s, we came together. Now I was a partier, but I'm glad to know people who didn't party like yourself. You weren't much for party. You were always serious, always wanted to take care of business, always wanted to improve Detroit, always wanted to improve the conditions of Detroit. So I'm glad we had people like you who kept this city going, and just a few people like me who just wanted to have a good time.
No, but you showed us all the way. I mean, you have to have both. You got to be serious, and then you've got to have laughter, and you've got to have fun, and you've got to have smiles, and people around you who care about you. And you were always that, not just for me, but for everyone in this community. Now, we touched upon it briefly, but before I go to our next topic, I want to say again, this is WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the entire world, as well as in the nation. You're here. We're here in Detroit, and my guest today is the very, very, very distinguished gentleman, Mr. Sherman Eaton. Also school teacher, also a person who knows the plants based on what he's told me, but he knows a few other things, and we're going to examine those right now. Sherman, you've been a sort of a political operative for a while. Talk to me about politics and Detroit and the state of Michigan from your perspective.
From my perspective, and I have a long history of being around local politicians, mayors, governors, state senators, legislators, representatives. And through the course of the last 50 years, Detroit has gone through a tremendous transition. The first transition in my mind would be the exodus of over 500,000 people to the suburbs. That was one of the greatest challenges the city had to overcome, because when they left, they took a lot of our tax revenue.
Correct.
They left vacant buildings. Crime increased a little because there was not the residency that we needed and the eyes and ears on the street. So that was a big hit for the city, the exodus of that many people. Through that transition, we moved to another phase. Then we got gentrification, which has had a tremendous impact on this city, but a positive one as well. One of the biggest changes that I recognize now is the lack of power that we once had as a Detroit resident. We used to have more power. We used to be more involved in our city, and there used to be more opportunities for Detroiters in our city.
You're talking about for African American Detroiters?
For African American Detroiters. For whatever reason, I see that declining.
It is declining, and it's a real problem. Although, as we both know, the minority business statistics have also declined, but there are also, there are different businesses now, different types of opportunities than before. But what bothers me the most is the fact that what I call the golden circle, which is everything south of the boulevard, down to the river. We've been eliminated from that part of town almost altogether. And the new real estate opportunities and so forth there are, all in the high six figures, over $500,000. And so we're not getting back in there anytime soon. I mean, we don't have those kind of opportunities. To me, that is significant.
Huge.
I mean, I always say that the Q line was built for as you say, for the gentrifiers, because now they don't have to come downtown like you and I do and have to pay $25-$30 to park to go to the Fox or go to a Little Caesars Arena. They can just walk out their door, walk right into the middle of the street, catch the Q line down where they got to go. They don't have the expenses. They don't have to pay for the services that we have to pay for in order to enjoy many of the venues, sports and otherwise, in the city of Detroit, because they can either walk to it or they can jump on the queue line, because that's what it's there for.
Mm-hmm.
You can go straight to the Opera House,
Mm-hmm.
straight to wherever you want to go. And it's very, very disturbing to me that now we have what I call the golden circle.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. And it's like in the old days, they say blacks get back and whites you're all right. And that's really what happened.
Well, certainly those opportunities are afforded to us as well. We don't take advantage of them because there's not. Those are the things that we're not attracted to. You know, they're nice, but we have not gravitated to some of those opportunities for a lot of reasons.
Well, we can't gravitate to them economically
Right.
because it's too expensive. Um, there's a real housing crisis right now in Detroit, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, rents have doubled and tripled.
Mm-hmm.
The community is being pushed out. This has happened in Washington D.C.
Other
and,
cities.
and other cities as well. I mean, it's a real problem, and without rent controls like what they have in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
New York City wouldn't have any black people or minorities
For
there
sure.
either. And we don't have anything like rent control here, unfortunately, which we need to perhaps look into and do something about from a legislative standpoint for longtime city residents.
Well, I'm going to tell you, with this gerrymandering, with the way they designed the new legislative districts,
Hmm.
it's going to be very tough to have a Detroiter as a representative for Detroiters, because I think Detroiters in the legislature might be slightly under attack, and a lot of people who represented us in the past will not represent us in the future. There will be new people representing us in the very new future, I think.
Well, that and I think the tone has changed a lot too. Um, the country sometimes wants things that are just way outside the parameters of what we've looked at before.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it at the federal level,
Mm-hmm.
and now because we cut off our own gas reserves, we cut off now our gas, of course, is almost $3.50 a gallon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're doing things to appease certain people with a certain agenda, but not what's good for the overall masses of people.
I don't even know if we're part of the equation anymore. I mean, X plus us equals 0 now. Yeah.
Well, there are 40 million of us now.
Right.
So, I mean, at the time of the Civil War, there were only 4 million.
Mm-hmm.
So now, we not only did our, if you will, sort of revolution within the plantations in which we went and joined the Civil War, and joined the Union Army. Not only did we win that war, and I was listening to a presentation the other day by in which the gentleman indicated that 18 people, as a result of black people in the Civil War, got the Congressional Medal of Honor. More than any time in history, because we were such great soldiers and such great leaders. We wouldn't have won the war without us. It's just that simple. And we wouldn't have a great country without our labor, etc. There were 4 million slaves in the United States of America.
Without question, we have fought in every war that the United States has ever entered
That's correct.
with great valiantry and sacrifice.
That's correct.
And somehow that gets lost in all the history books. But without our free labor for 200, 300 years, this wealth would have never succeeded the heights that it has.
That's true.
The generational wealth from slavery is still ongoing.
Right. Right. And largely not for us, quite frankly.
No, not for us. No.
Definitely.
We're not in that equation.
Definitely not for us. What can we expect? You think in our community? You're going to do some. I mean, you do obviously a very classy publication, very high gloss publication, but you do endorse political candidates. You do. You actually get involved in the social aspects of our community. Are there any things on your agenda that are coming up that we need to be aware of?
I think for the time being, I'm not going to endorse anybody, but I am going to sell advertisement.
Okay.
And this is my last magazine that I'm going to do. The one coming up, I'm going to sell the Native Detroiter
Okay.
to an outside interest who will have my full support and my full backing and my expertise. Uh,
Okay. Is this for next year? Is that what you?
no, it'll be. I'm going to put an issue out in April, and then they're going to take over after that.
Okay.
Um, we live in a very unstable economic environment right now, and it's going to be very difficult to maintain business, to keep a business like it has been in the past. Subsequent supply chain issues are going to affect every businessman in America. And as much as I love the Native Detroiter, as much as I would love to keep it going, I see challenges coming that I may not be able to overcome.
Like what?
Supply chain issues.
What do you mean, like ink or what? You put on
You know,
paper?
paper is not as easy to get as you used to get.
No.
But I'll give you an example. I had 5 auto dealerships in the Native Detroiter. None of them have inventory or very little inventory. They don't have cars.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't need to advertise this next issue because they don't have any cars to sell.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my other retailers are being challenged by the new social climate, the fact that since the pandemic, people don't go out as much, so they're not buying as many clothes. So
Okay.
my retailers are being challenged. Some of my restaurants are being challenged, but for some reason, floods and good times and some of the ones that people really enjoy have been able to continue, but lesser restaurants have not been able to. So we're getting ready to go into an economic climate that most business people aren't really ready for at
Do you
this
think we're
moment.
going to have an economic decline? We always do, quite frankly, unfortunately, when Democrats are in power.
We're all of my brokers, stockbrokers and financial analysts says we're due for a recession.
Okay.
And if you can get through this next recession with all of the challenges that's going to bring, you are a great business person, no doubt in my mind, because selling apples on the street corner has never been this difficult before.
Yeah, and we're particularly challenged now I think by the perception that America is weak. And I think we see that this week with the invasion of Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
by Russia. And I keep hearing people say to me, they weren't a member of NATO. Neither was Iraq, neither was Iran. I mean, neither was Kuwait. But when Iraq wanted to invade, was going into Kuwait, we put together Operation Desert Storm and we pushed them back. There are 7 wars that we've been in recently, quote wars, not not like World War II or anything like that, in which we put troops on the ground and addressed issues in order to stop invasions by neighboring countries. This is something that we do. We have been the policemen of the world, and I understand that there's pros and cons of that, but there are strategic interests in Ukraine that are definitely to our advantage, considering the fact that they're the largest landmass country in Western Europe, among other things, the largest ore producer in the world. I mean, they're like number 1, 2, and 3 in about 50 different categories in terms of magnesium, in terms of different metals, precious metals, things like that. This is not, this is not a piece of dirt,
Right.
that
It has
that
value.
has tumbleweed on it.
It has value.
It has real value. Not to mention its position on the sea and everything else there. So for us to be, I watched those people yesterday. I can't even watch it now, Sherman, quite frankly. All those people at the train station trying to get on, everybody's trying to flee. For us to let this happen, and let this happen in a sophisticated society where they're running water, cars, buildings, construction, where there's an organized society. We buy most of our robotic stuff from Ukraine, for example. It all comes from Ukraine. They're an educated population, you know, a civil population, and to let this happen makes no sense. When we protected the Kuwaitis, that's a sliver. That's like the size of Rhode Island,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and Ukraine is bigger than Texas.
You know, in many regards, on international politics, I will say quite frankly that I'm not qualified to render an opinion.
Hmm.
Some things I'm qualified, and some things I'm very knowledgeable about, and other things I've got to do more research.
Hmm.
I think there is a perception, international perception, that America may be not as strong as it once was. How that perception will translate or transmit or transfer to Detroiters, I'm not really sure. But I know in international politics and world economies are so connected today that if something happens somewhere across the globe, it can affect a small town in Michigan.
Correct.
So, to that regard, the world economy is interconnected. So, we're going to feel something as a result of this Russian expansion.
Right, but I guess my problem is that we're permitting it to happen. We didn't let it happen in Kuwait. We didn't let it happen in numerous other countries. So why are we letting it happen here? It makes no sense.
I'm going to tell you, everything that's happened in the last 3 years makes no sense to me. You know, I can't figure out an end game to a lot of the things that have happened in the last 3 years. When Dr. Fauci made us aware that that this some virus was coming and it was going to take out
He's
millions of.
flip flopped so many times. You know that.
You know, I'm saying some of this just doesn't make any sense.
Mm-mm.
You
And we didn't deal with China about it.
right? I mean,
How do you do that?
there's so many things happening that make no sense. I cannot figure out the end game. You know, okay, why is this happening, and what's the end game as a result of it?
I
I
think
just
I think
can't.
the end game, at least for obviously China has made it very clear that President Xi has spoken on it many times, and that is that China wants to dominate the world now with Russia. A China-Russia alliance will destroy it. We can't do both.
No, they
We
can't
can
do
do
it.
both,
No.
but I mean that's why that's why my brother was saying yesterday about how I guess Trump was so close to Putin. I said that bottom line is that in those 4 years we had no wars. Everybody stayed in their lane. Well, even when Obama left office, he said that he thought that the president of North Korea, we were going to go to war with North Korea, because of their nuclear
Capabilities.
trials, right,
Right.
and everything. But he smoothed that over. I don't care how he did it. But the president, the little fat guy, I can't even call his name right now. He calmed down. He stopped the nuclear tests and all that. And we're talking to Russia. Russia wouldn't have done this. I don't think. I think the perception now, unfortunately, from an international standpoint, particularly after what happened in Afghanistan, when we left there with our tails between our legs, and left our soldiers and left our people and all that stuff. America doesn't do this. America's too strong. When I saw the Taliban flag hanging below a Black Hawk helicopter, which they had no technology obviously to do it, I was through. And now all those uniforms, those billions of dollars, $85 billion in armaments and uniforms, they wear all our stuff, all our guns, all our stuff. The Taliban has it
Well,
on. I mean, so you're right. But it's a very, very dangerous, very dangerous time, I think, in general for America. We're right at that tipping point where we can either lose, I think, permanently, or unless we get some kahungas and step up to the plate and start acting like America again, we could lose a lot, and our children and our grandchildren will do terribly.
we've already lost a lot.
That's correct. When we lost our education
We,
system.
we, we already lost a lot. I would tell anybody, do your research. Don't listen and believe everything you hear. because so many things aren't making sense. When they don't make sense to you, research it,
That's right.
read about it, try to figure it out. You cannot go through the world blind. Read, research, and
I agree. You
analyze.
have to read.
Read, research, and analyze everything you hear. Don't
Correct.
take everything you hear as a point of good for you, because there are a lot of people who don't like us.
So what's your prognosis for Detroit? Since you're
Oh,
a,
but
a premier journalist in this community,
I love this city.
I do
I
too.
love this city. I think about this city day and night. I want Detroit to be the very best it can be, but to be the best it can be, it's going to have to include more of us. It's going to
In a policy making a position, right, and in business and in successful businesses, meet more African American people.
we got to be part of the equation.
That's
We
correct.
got to get back.
And we're
in the
not
game.
now, in your opinion.
Very little. Very little. Not to the extent that we should be.
Okay. So what would you do to change that?
What would I do to change it? Well, to change anything, you need power. And to have power, you must first organize. You can have no power without organization. You can have no power without a plan. So, our intellectuals, our representatives, have got to organize and take the power that they have and increase it, elevate it, distribute it, and get the common man involved. Get the local Detroiter involved. Because once you
The
get
native Detroiter. Gotcha.
get us involved at the table, let us be a part of the policy making and some of the direction of the city. And my biggest example that we're no longer a part of the equation is bike lanes. Where did we get bike lanes from all over the city?
Oh yeah.
Bike, where did that come from?
Right.
I
It
didn't
was a
even
grant we got. Right.
I didn't even hear about. Why do we have bike lanes going up streets that, very
Which
few,
nobody has a bike. Right. We don't use bicycles a lot in the city of Detroit.
not to the degree that we have bike lanes. I said, well, we've got to include us in some of the direction of the city.
Well, I know that we had a huge grant for them, and then they just put them in everywhere to try to make Detroit, but they didn't do it in the suburbs. You notice that. And now, of course, not only do we have bike lanes, but we have humps, those speed
Right.
humps everywhere, and that is so embarrassing. But everybody's saying, well, it slowed everybody down. But you don't have this in major cities. This is not a country town. You don't have them in any of the suburbs. Not only does it ruin the suspension of your car, and if you hit it, over
Right.
25 miles an hour, it also decreases the value of your property because it tells people, oh, this is not a safe area. They got to have all these humps.
Okay, I never thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern. Palmer Woods doesn't have it, but they have streets that turn and so forth, so that it slows you down with beautiful things, not big humps in the middle of the streets everywhere. So I don't know. There are a lot of things to be done and said, but you're right. There is a perception that black people have less power in the city of Detroit now, because they do. That's what you're telling us, and I guess that's what you're going to be reporting on. I'm distressed that you say that you're going to stop publishing after April.
I am.
That is very distressing to me, and I'm sure our audience as well. But you've decided that you want to do other things, as I understand it. You want to go to Florida, etc.
Well, when you turn 71, you in the fourth quarter.
That's correct. The shot clock's running down.
Yeah,
It's
the
a friend
shot-
of mine.
the
That's a
shot-
friend of mine
shot-
says.
shot
The shot
clock
clock is running down.
It's running down. And looking in retrospect, life went by much too quickly.
Yep.
When I look back at being 20, 30, 40, and 50, and 60,
It's like a blur.
life was a blur.
That's correct.
Now I'm in the fourth quarter. Nah.
Okay.
I got to do something different. I got to go out and enjoy the rest of this game.
I heard that you don't have to carry your camera everywhere anymore, except for the things that you enjoy. Sherman Eaton, a publisher par excellence, not only of Native Detroiter magazine, but you're one of the most respected journalists in our state and in our country because you made it happen yourself. This was your blood, sweat, and tears. You created a magazine now with 130 pages, all glossy paper, which is expensive, full color, even more expensive. And the best part is because you were an English teacher, it is correct. It uses correct English. It is from a literal standpoint, absolutely perfect. I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for your service to our community through this magazine and as a teacher in the Detroit Public School System.
Linda, thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
I just want to be you.
No, we're friends forever. You know, you're my BFF. There's no question about it.
Yes.
Thank you so much.